Listen to me carefully. Your life isn't stuck because you lack talent. It isn't stuck because of bad luck. And it's not stuck because the world is against you. Your life looks the way it does right now because of what you do every single day. Not once in a while, not when you feel motivated, but on the ordinary days when no one is watching. See, people chase big goals, but repeat small habits that sabotage them. And here's the truth that changes everything. If you don't change your habits, you don't change your life. So the real question isn't, can your life improve? The real question is, are you ready to start today, or are you going to keep rehearsing the same future? Let me slow this down for a moment, because this is where everything begins, whether people realize it or not. Most people think their life is shaped by big moments, the promotion, the breakup, the breakthrough, the failure. They believe their destiny turns on these dramatic events, and so they wait. They wait for something big to happen. They wait for motivation to strike. They wait for the right time. And while they're waiting, their life is being shaped quietly and visibly every single day, not by their goals, by their habits. What you do when the alarm goes off, what you do when no one is watching, what you do when you're tired, frustrated, bored, or uncomfortable. Those moments don't feel important, but they are deciding everything, because habits are not loud. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand attention. They just repeat. And whatever repeats becomes your life. Think about it. You don't wake up one day suddenly unhealthy. You practice it. You don't wake up one day confident or insecure. You rehearse it. You don't wake up one day successful or stuck. You've been training for that outcome for years through the smallest daily choices you barely notice. And here's the part that changes how you see yourself. Your habits are always working, even when you're not thinking about them. They are silently reinforcing who you believe you are. Every time you hit snooze, instead of getting up, your brain learns something. Every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, and don't, your nervous system records it. Every time you avoid the hard conversation, the workout, the discipline, the focus, your identity is being shaped. This isn't about guilt. This isn't about beating yourself up. This is about awareness, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most people live on autopilot. They let yesterday decide today. They let old habits run their future, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But nothing changes because nothing changes. The same inputs create the same outcomes. The same habits create the same life. Here's the truth. Most people never stop to face your habits are a mirror. They reflect your standards. Not what you say you want, not what you hope for, not what you talk about, but what you actually expect from yourself. And whatever standard you tolerate becomes your normal. If you tolerate low energy, low focus, low discipline, low expectations, your habits will match that. If you tolerate excuses, your habits will protect them. If you tolerate comfort over growth, your habits will make sure you stay right where you are. Not because you're weak, but because habits exist to keep you familiar, not fulfilled. And yet, this is also the most hopeful truth you'll ever hear, because if habits shape your destiny, then changing a habit changes your direction. Not all at once, not overnight, but permanently. You don't need to change your entire life today. That's a lie people tell themselves to stay stuck. What you need is to change one pattern, one daily action, one response, one standard. And when that shifts, the ripple effect is unstoppable. Understand this. Habits are how your identity expresses itself. If you see yourself as someone who quits, your habits will help you quit. If you see yourself as someone who grows, your habits will demand growth. That's why change feels hard at first. You're not just changing behavior, you're challenging who you think you are, and your brain will resist. Not because you're incapable, but because it's designed to conserve energy and protect the familiar. Growth feels unfamiliar. Discipline feels uncomfortable. Consistency feels boring before it feels powerful. That's normal. That's not a sign to stop. That's a sign you're finally doing something different. Most people wait for confidence to start, but confidence is built after action, not before. You don't feel like a disciplined person and then act disciplined. You act disciplined and your identity catches up. Every habit you repeat is a vote for the person you're becoming. Cast enough votes and eventually there's no debate about who you are. This is why small habits matter more than massive bursts of effort. Anyone can be intense for a week. Anyone can be motivated after a video. But the life you live is built on what you practice when motivation fades, when no one is clapping, when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable. That's where habits become destiny. And here's something powerful most people overlook. Your habits are always answering one question: who's in control? Is it your emotions or is it your standards? Is it your past or is it your vision? Is it your comfort or is it your future? Every day through habits you answer that question. If you don't choose your habits deliberately, they will be chosen for you by your environment, your past conditioning, and other people's expectations. And then one day you wake up in a life you didn't consciously build. But when you decide to interrupt the pattern, when you change how you start your morning, how you respond to stress, how you treat your body, how you talk to yourself, you're no longer reacting, you're creating. This is the moment where people either stay asleep or wake up. Because once you realize that your habits are shaping your destiny, excuses lose their power, blame loses its grip, waiting loses its appeal. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what am I practicing every day that's creating this? That question changes everything. So don't underestimate the power of the next small habit you choose. It's not small, it's a signal. It tells your brain, your body, and your future who's in charge now, and the moment you change what you practice daily, you begin changing where your life is headed. Now let's go deeper, because even when people understand that habits shape their destiny, they still get stuck. They know what to do. They've read the books. They've watched the videos. They've made the plans. And yet, in the moment that matters most, they don't follow through. Not because they're lazy, not because they're broken, but because they don't understand the power of their state. Everything you do in your life is filtered through the emotional and physical state you're in at that moment. The way you think, the way you decide, the way you act, the way you treat other people, the way you treat yourself, it's all influenced by your state. When your energy is low, your focus is narrow. When your body feels weak, your mind looks for excuses. When you feel overwhelmed, your brain goes into survival mode. And in that state, even the best habits fall apart. Most people try to change their lives from a powerless state. They sit, slouched, exhausted, distracted, scrolling through problems, and then they wonder why they can't take powerful action. You cannot build a powerful life from a powerless physiology. Your body is not separate from your mind. It is the doorway to your mind. Here's what most people don't realize. You can change your state in seconds, not by thinking your way out of it, but by moving your body, changing your breathing, changing your posture, and changing what you focus on. You don't wait until you feel good to take action. You take action to feel good. Think about the times in your life when you were at your best, when you felt unstoppable, when you felt clear, confident, energized. Your problems didn't disappear in those moments, but you handled them differently. Same life, same circumstances, different state. And that state changed everything. Your habits live inside your state. If your state is weak, it's collapse. If your state is strong, your habits become automatic. That's why two people can know the same information and get completely different results. One changes their state and takes action. The other stays stuck in the same emotional pattern and stays where they are. Most people are letting their state control them instead of learning to control their state. They wake up and immediately check their phone. They flood their nervous system with stress, comparison, noise, and urgency. Before the day even starts, they're already reactive, and then they try to be disciplined, focused, patient, and confident. It doesn't work that way. If you want to change your life, you have to take ownership of how you feel, not as something that happens to you, but as something you create. Your state is not an accident. It's a result of patterns, and patterns can be interrupted. Movement changes emotion, breath changes chemistry, focus changes meaning. You don't need hours, you need intention. You need a ritual, something you do daily that tells your nervous system, I'm in charge now. When you change your state, you change what you believe is possible. In a low state, your future looks heavy. In a strong state, your future looks expandable. In a low state, discipline feels like punishment. In a strong state, discipline feels like self-respect. In a low state, you avoid challenges. In a strong state, you lean into them. This is why waiting for motivation is a trap. Motivation is unreliable because it depends on state, but rituals create state, and state creates momentum. When you build a daily practice that strengthens your body and sharpens your focus, you don't have to force yourself to act. Action becomes natural. And here's the most important part, your identity shifts with your state. When you repeatedly put yourself in a powerful state, your brain starts to associate effort with strength instead of pain, challenge with growth instead of fear, discomfort with progress instead of danger. And suddenly the habits that once felt hard become who you are. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their state, and then they judge themselves when they fail. That judgment keeps them stuck. But when you understand state, failure becomes feedback. You stop asking, what's wrong with me, and start asking, what state was I in when I made that choice? That question gives you power, because now You don't need to fix your personality. You don't need to wait for confidence. You don't need to hope your circumstances change. You need to change your state, and everything else follows. Imagine what happens when you enter your day with energy instead of exhaustion, focus instead of distraction, purpose instead of pressure. The same habits suddenly feel doable. The same goals feel closer. The same challenges feel manageable. Your state is the bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. And if you don't consciously cross that bridge, you'll keep circling the same patterns no matter how badly you want change. So stop asking yourself how to feel motivated and start asking yourself how to shift your state. Because the moment you take control of your energy, you take control of your life, change your state, and you change everything. Now let's talk about something that's shaping your life far more than your talent, your intelligence, NCE, or your circumstances, what you choose to focus on. Because whether you realize it or not, your focus is deciding how you feel, what you notice, and ultimately how you live. You don't experience life as it is, you experience life as you focus on it. Right now, in this very moment, there are thousands of things you could be aware of. The feeling in your body, the sound around you, the thoughts moving through your mind, but your brain filters almost all of it out. It has to. If it didn't, you'd be overwhelmed. So it selects, and whatever it selects becomes your reality. That means your reality is not fixed. It's flexible. It changes the moment your focus changes. Most people don't consciously choose their focus. They let it be hijacked by problems, worries, memories, fears, and distractions. And then they wonder why they feel stressed, discouraged, or stuck. If you focus on what's wrong long enough, your brain will make it feel permanent. If you focus on what's missing long enough, your brain will convince you that you're behind. If you focus on what you can't control, your nervous system will stay in a constant state of tension. But here's the shift that changes everything. Focus doesn't just determine what you see, it determines what you feel, and what you feel determines how you act. When you focus on obstacles, your body tightens, your breath becomes shallow, your thinking narrows, you become reactive. When you focus on solutions, your physiology opens, your breathing deepens, your thinking expands, you become creative. Same situation, different focus, completely different outcome. This is why two people can face the same challenge and have totally different lives. One focuses on why it's happening to them. The other focuses on how to grow through it. One trains their brain to look for threats. The other trains their brain to look for opportunities. Over time, those mental habits become automatic, and those automatic focuses become destiny. Your focus is a muscle. Whatever you train it to look for, it will find. If you train it to look for problems, it will become brilliant at finding them. If you train it to look for progress, growth, and possibility, it will find those too. The brain doesn't argue with your focus, it obeys it. Most people are exhausting themselves mentally because they're focusing on things they can't change, replaying the past, or worrying about futures that haven't happened. That kind of focus drains energy without creating results, and then they're surprised when they feel tired all the time. Energy follows focus. When your focus is scattered, your energy is scattered. When your focus is clear, your energy becomes powerful. Here's something critical to understand. What you focus on becomes meaningful, and meaning shapes emotion. If you focus on a challenge and decide it means you're failing, you feel defeated. If you focus on that same challenge and decide it means you're growing, you feel empowered. The event didn't change, the meaning did, and meaning is created by focus. That's why gratitude is so powerful, not because it denies problems, but because it redirects focus. When you intentionally focus on what's working, what you've learned, what you've survived, your nervous system shifts. Your brain starts scanning for support instead of danger. You don't become complacent, you become grounded. This doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you choose which part of reality you give your energy to. Because energy is finite, attention is finite. And wherever you place it, your life grows in that direction. Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do, but real discipline starts with focus. If you focus on how hard something is, you'll avoid it. If you focus on why it matters, you'll move. If you focus on the long-term reward instead of the short-term discomfort, your behavior changes automatically. This is why habits and focus are inseparable. You can't sustain powerful habits if your focus is constantly pulled toward distraction and negativity. You have to decide what deserves your attention. You have to decide what voices you listen to, what information you consume, what thoughts you rehearse, because every thought you rehearse becomes easier to think again. Your mind is always asking one question: what's important right now? And whatever you repeatedly answer with your focus becomes your priority, whether you intend it or not. If you focus on urgency all day, you'll feel busy but unfulfilled. If you focus on progress, you'll feel momentum. If you focus on comparison, you'll feel behind. If you focus on contribution, you'll feel purpose. This is where people either take their power back or give it away. You don't need more time, you need better focus. You don't need more information, you need clearer attention. When you choose your focus intentionally, you stop living in reaction mode and start living in creation mode. And yes, your focus will wander. That's human. The difference is whether you notice it and bring it back. That act alone builds strength. Each time you redirect your attention toward what matters, you're training your brain to work for you instead of against you. Over time, this becomes your default. You stop obsessing over what drains you and start investing in what builds you. You stop magnifying problems and start magnifying possibilities. You don't become naive, you become resilient. Because when you master your focus, you master your emotional state. And when you master your emotional state, your habits strengthen. And when your habits strengthen, your life changes. So the real work isn't out there, it's here. In the moment-to-moment choices of where you place your attention, where focus goes, energy flows, and whatever you consistently give energy to becomes your life. Let's bring this down to where real change actually happens, because this is where most people either transform their lives or quietly give up. Everyone loves the idea of a massive breakthrough, a dramatic turning point, a moment where everything changes at once. But that fantasy is exactly what keeps people stuck, because real transformation doesn't come from intensity. It comes from consistency. Small actions done consistently are shaping your future, whether you like it or not. Most people underestimate the power of what they do daily and overestimate the power of what they do occasionally. They'll have one strong week and expect a new life, one burst of discipline and expect permanent confidence, one good decision and expect momentum to magically carry them forward. And when it doesn't, they think something is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong. They just don't understand how progress actually works. Your brain is wired to change through repetition. Not drama, not motivation, repetition. Every time you take a small action, you're sending a signal. You're telling your nervous system, this is who I am now. And the brain listens, slowly at first, quietly, but it listens. That's why the smallest habits are often the most powerful. They don't overwhelm you, they don't trigger resistance, they don't require hype. They slip past your fear and your excuses and start rewiring you from the inside out. Most people try to change too much at once. They want to overhaul their entire life in a day. New routine, new mindset, new body, new future, and when they can't maintain it, they collapse back into old patterns and call it failure. But it's not failure, it's a strategy that doesn't work. Consistency beats intensity every time. Think about it. You don't build strength by lifting the heaviest weight once. You build it by showing up again and again. You don't build trust in a relationship with one grand gesture. You build it through daily reliability. And you don't build a new identity through one decision. You build it through repeated behavior. Every small action compounds, just like interest. At first, it feels insignificant. You look at the effort and think, this isn't enough. But over time, those small actions stack. They create momentum. They change your self-image. And eventually, they produce results that look like overnight success to everyone else. But you know the truth. You earned it quietly. This is where patience becomes power, because consistency requires faith. Faith that what you're doing matters even when you can't see results yet. Faith that progress is happening beneath the surface. Faith that your future self is being built in moments that feel ordinary. Most people quit in the invisible phase, when results haven't shown up yet, when effort feels unrewarded, when change feels slow. But that's exactly where the foundation is being laid. That's where discipline becomes identity. That's where habits stop feeling forced and start feeling natural. And here's something important. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means return. You will miss days. You will slip. You will fall out of rhythm. That's not the problem. The problem is what you do next. Do you make it mean you failed, or do you return to the habit without drama? People who win don't avoid setbacks. They recover faster. Consistency is not about never breaking the chain. It's about never letting the break become an excuse to stop. One missed day doesn't change your life, but the story you tell yourself about it might. This is where small actions become massive breakthroughs. Not because the actions themselves are dramatic, but because they build trust with yourself. Every time you show up, even in a small way, you reinforce something powerful. I do what I say I'll do. And that belief changes how you see yourself. And how you see yourself changes how you live. Momentum is born from motion, not motivation. You don't wait to feel ready. You move, and readiness follows. You don't wait to feel confident. You act, and confidence catches up. And the more consistent you are, the less effort it takes. What once felt heavy becomes automatic. What once felt hard becomes normal. This is why people who focus on daily progress outperform people who chase big moments. They don't burn out, they don't rely on mood, they don't negotiate with their feelings. They build systems that carry them forward even on low energy days. And those low energy days matter because that's when consistency proves who you are. Anyone can act when they feel inspired, but the life you build is determined by what you do when inspiration is gone. Small actions also protect you from overwhelm. When you know exactly what you need to do today, not everything, just today, you stay present, you stay grounded, you stay moving, progress becomes manageable, sustainable, real, and over time something incredible happens. Your standards rise. What once felt like effort becomes expectation. You no longer debate whether to show up, you just do. And that's when life starts to accelerate. Because success is not a single decision, it's a daily practice. So stop asking yourself whether you're doing enough and start asking whether you're doing something consistently. Stop chasing breakthroughs and start building momentum. Because when small actions are repeated with intention, they don't stay small for long. Small, consistent actions create massive long-term breakthroughs. Now, here's a truth that will either free you or frustrate you, depending on whether you accept it. Most people believe their problem is a lack of willpower. They think, if I were stronger, more disciplined, more motivated, I'd follow through. And because they believe that, they spend their life fighting themselves, forcing, pushing, resisting, and eventually burning out. But willpower is not the real issue. Your environment is quietly shaping your behavior every single day. What you see, what's within reach, who you're around, what's easy, what's hard, what's normal, that's what's programming you. And the environment wins far more often than motivation ever will. Think about it. When you're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, do you rise to your highest intentions or do you fall to your easiest options? You don't suddenly become a different person in those moments. You default to whatever your environment makes convenient. That's not weakness. That's how the brain works. Most people are trying to build new habits in an old environment. They want focus, but they live in distraction. They want health, but they're surrounded by temptation. They want growth, but they're immersed in comfort. And then they judge themselves for failing. You don't need more self-control. You need better design. Your environment is either pulling you forward or holding you back, and it's doing it silently. If unhealthy food is visible and healthy food is hidden, guess what wins? If your phone is always within reach, focus doesn't stand a chance. If you surround yourself with people who normalize excuses, excuses will feel reasonable. Over time, that environment becomes your identity. This is why real change becomes sustainable when you stop relying on willpower and start engineering your surroundings. You make the right choices easier and the wrong choices harder. You stop negotiating with yourself and start setting yourself up to win. Look at your space. Look at your routines. Look at the people you spend the most time with. They are constantly signaling what's acceptable, what's expected, what's normal. And humans adapt to normal faster than they adapt to intention. Most people don't realize they are being trained every day by their environment. Trained to sit longer, to scroll more, to react instead of create, to consume instead of build. And because the training is subtle, they think it's their personality. It's not. Change the environment and behavior changes naturally. When your environment supports growth, discipline feels lighter. When it supports comfort, growth feels exhausting. That's why some people seem naturally consistent. It's not that they're special, it's that they've removed friction from the habits that matter and added friction to the habits that don't. This applies not just to physical space, but to emotional and social environments too. The conversations you're part of, the standards around you, the energy you absorb. If you're constantly around negativity, criticism, and limitation, your nervous system stays defensive. You don't even realize how much energy that costs you. And here's something important. Your environment includes your digital world. What you consume daily is shaping your thoughts. If your mind is constantly flooded with outrage, comparison, and noise, clarity becomes impossible. Focus becomes rare. Peace becomes unfamiliar. And again, you think something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong. You're just living in an environment that's training you to be distracted. When you consciously design your environment, you reclaim power. You decide what you see when you wake up. You decide what gets your attention. You decide who has access to your energy. And those decisions compound just like habits do. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself from the world. It means you become intentional. You stop letting randomness shape your future. You stop allowing convenience to decide your character. And here's the part that requires courage. Sometimes changing your environment means changing your relationships, not abandoning people, but recognizing that proximity influences behavior. If everyone around you is settling, growth will feel lonely at first. If everyone around you avoids discomfort, discipline will feel strange. But strange is not wrong. Strange is often the first sign of change. Your environment should challenge you, not drain you. It should remind you of who you're becoming, not who you used to be. And when it doesn't, it's your responsibility to adjust it. This is how habits become automatic instead of exhausting. This is how consistency becomes natural instead of forced. You stop swimming against the current and start using it. When your environment supports your goals, you don't need to constantly motivate yourself. You just show up, you move, you act, and momentum builds. So stop asking why you keep falling back into old patterns and start asking what in your environment is pulling you there. Because the moment you change what surrounds you, you change what feels normal. And when growth becomes normal, everything accelerates. Now it all comes together. Because this is the moment where information turns into transformation. Everything you've heard so far, habits, state, focus, consistency, environment, none of it truly locks in until one thing happens. A decision, not a preference, not a wish, not a hope, a decision about who you are. Most people spend their lives negotiating with themselves. They say things like, I'll try, I'll see how it goes, I'll start when things calm down. What they don't realize is that every time they do that, they're reinforcing an identity of hesitation. They're teaching themselves that their word is flexible, optional, temporary. The most powerful force in the human psyche is identity. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are, not who you want to be, not who you admire, who you believe you are right now. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you'll find reasons to struggle. If you see yourself as someone who needs motivation, you'll wait for it. If you see yourself as someone who quits when things get hard, your brain will look for exits the moment discomfort shows up. Not because you're incapable, but because you're being consistent with your identity. Here's the shift that changes everything. The moment you decide who you are, your behavior reorganizes around that decision. Not slowly. Immediately. When someone decides, I don't smoke, they don't wrestle with every cigarette. They don't need willpower. It's not a debate. It's not who they are. But when someone says, I'm trying to quit, every craving becomes a battle. Same behavior, different identity, completely different outcome. Most people try to change their life without changing their identity, and that's why change never lasts. They set goals that contradict who they believe they are, and eventually identity always wins, but identity is not fixed. It's chosen. You don't discover who you are, you decide who you are, and that decision is reinforced through action, small actions, consistent actions, actions that say, this is who I am now. The reason this feels uncomfortable is because it requires letting go of the old story, the excuses, the explanations, the version of yourself that's familiar, even if it's painful. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar growth. That's why people cling to old identities long after they've outgrown them. But the moment you decide, this is no longer who I am, something shifts. Your brain starts filtering information differently. Opportunities stand out. Distractions lose power. Habits that once felt forced begin to feel aligned. You're no longer pushing yourself forward, you're pulling yourself toward who you've decided to be. And this decision doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't require an announcement. It requires commitment, quiet, internal, non-negotiable commitment. Most people wait for proof before they decide. They say, once I'm confident, I'll act confident. Once I'm disciplined, I'll act disciplined. But identity doesn't work that way. You decide first, you act second, and the proof comes last. Every time you act in alignment with your new identity, you strengthen it. Every time you act against it, you weaken it. This is why daily habits matter so much. They're not just behaviors, they're identity votes. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall or rise to the level of who you believe you are. And here's the part that separates those who change from those who stay the same. Once you decide who you are, you stop debating with yourself. You stop asking, should I, and start saying, of course I do. This is who I am. That eliminates friction. That creates clarity. That builds momentum. This doesn't mean you'll never feel resistance. It means resistance no longer has authority. Feelings don't lead. Identity does. You act because it's aligned, not because it's easy. And over time, that alignment creates confidence that isn't dependent on outcomes. You trust yourself. You believe your word. You move through life with a different posture, a different energy, a different standard. This is where everything becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Decisions take less energy. Habits take less effort. Focus becomes clearer because you're no longer trying to become someone. You're expressing who you've decided you are. So stop asking yourself what you should do next and start asking yourself who you are committed to being. Let that answer guide your habits, your focus, your environment, your consistency. Decide today not who you want to be someday, but who you are now. And let everything else fall into alignment.